I am addicted to I-cord edges. Many of my shawls and sweaters begin with an I-cord cast on. Sometimes they're really long, like this Mohairino Medley begins with a really jagged I-cord. And sometimes you just do a little small nugget of a tail, a really small I-cord tail, and then you pick up stitches. So let's learn how to do the I-cord cast on. The I-cord cast on begins with 3 stitches cast on, using any cast on method that you like. Then you can turn around to knit 3. Once you knit 3 stitches, slip 3 stitches onto left needle. Knit 3. Slip 3 stitches onto left needle. Keep repeating that as many times as the pattern instructs. Knit 3 and slip the 3 stitches onto the left needle. I'm going to show that for you English style knitters. Knit 3 and slip 3 stitches onto the left needle. Some of my patterns begin with a short little I-cord tail, where you might just have 12 or 24 stitches to cast on, or 24 rows to cast on. So keep on going as many times as the pattern instructs. If you're working with a pattern that says repeat that knit 3, slip 3 80 more times, or 120 more times, just do the motions without counting. I don't like to count. So we can just make a tail and then we can count later. So right now, I just made a tail and I was talking. I don't know how many rows I did. So just make a long tail and then count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 rows. So if I need 20 rows, I need to keep going. So keep knitting stitches, making this beautiful little I-cord tail. And again, if you have a large number of rows that you have to knit, it might help you to place a stitch marker every 10 rows or so. You could clip in a stitch marker every 10 or 20 rows to help you count as you go. But again, if you have a really long cast on to do, like these really long edges, just cast on a bunch and we can count later. All right, I've done enough to show you. So after you're finished with the number of rows that you need, we're going to pick up stitches along the I-cord edge. You're going to want to make sure that you just knit 3 stitches onto your right needle. And when you pick up stitches along the I-cord edge, you can go through both legs of a row of a stitch. Look at that. I have 2 legs that I'm inserting the needle through. If you go through just 1, that's also fine, but going through 2 is more secure, and that's what I normally do. Just be careful as you're picking up stitches along the I-cord that you're always picking up into the same column. So you don't want to pick up here and then start twisting the cord in a spiral. That's going to look a little bit more sloppy. Always go into the same column. So for me, I find it helpful to pinch the I-cord so I can easily see this column of stitches. If you pick up stitches with your right hand throwing the yarn for English style knitting, you'll do the same motion of sticking the needle into each stitch, wrapping the yarn around, and pulling it through. When I wrap the yarn around the needle, I find it's helpful to give it a little bit of a tension. I'm pulling it this way to give it a little bit of a tension so that you can easily grab it and rescue it through that stitch. If the yarn is really loose, it's going to pop off and you're not going to get a stitch through that column. So pull with a little bit of tension to bring it on through. Cast on with however many stitches it says to in the pattern. If you're reaching the end of your cast on tail and let's say you already have the stitches you need right here, and there's already a few more stitches that look like they need to be picked up. Oh gosh, like I only needed to pick up 10 stitches and I still have a tail to go. You could unravel a few. I just took out 3 stitches and you could skip a row every now and then. So you could skip this stitch and move on to that stitch, skip this stitch, move on to the next one. So that can be a good way to kind of rescue your stitch count so you don't have to rip out that I-cord tail again. It's totally fine to fudge the numbers a little bit. Now, most of my patterns say to turn to work the wrong side row, and then it says pick up and knit 3 stitches from the I-cord cast on edge. That's right here. The first stitch you're going to pick up can be really close to your working tail of yarn. I'm going to get this one. Put it onto the left needle and knit through it. And then pick up another strand of yarn. It can really be like any strand of yarn at this cast on edge. And the third stitch, we need to pick up a third one. Dive in and see what you can get. There we go. I just picked up and knit 3 stitches from the I-cord cast on edge, and you can continue knitting or purling as instructed in the pattern. If you're picking up the cast on edge stitches holding the yarn in your right hand, you want the yarn to be in back as you pick up stitches, and pick up that first strand of yarn. It should be really close to your working tail of yarn. Here's the first strand picked up. Put it onto the left needle, and we're going to knit through that first picked up strand. Now let's pick up a second strand of yarn. It can be any strand of yarn along that cast on edge. Knit through it, and we need a third one. Just dive in and see what you can find. Oh, look at that. I found a strand of yarn. That's a strand of yarn. I'm going to knit it. There we go. We've got 3. Continue to knit or purl as instructed in the pattern. That's all there is to it. And when you repeat that I-cord cast on, it makes a really smooth I-cord beginning. And most of my patterns continue with I-cord edges along the right edge and the left edge of the patterns. This is the painting Chevrons shawl. So here's my I-cord tail cast on, and the I-cord edges will continue from the right edge, and here's the left edge. This is where I just picked up from that cast on corner. And if it looks kind of funky when you do that pickup, don't worry about it. We could always sew that little tail of yarn from our cast on edge. We could do some surgery to tidy that corner up. So don't worry about being too perfect. Here's another close-up look at a really long I-cord edge from Mohairino Medley. And this is a really short I-cord cast on for the Chevrollelogram scarf. So I apply this I-cord cast on technique to many Westknits designs, and you also might find this technique in some other patterns. So give it a practice, and it gets much easier the more you do it. These are a bunch of samples that use that I-cord cast on in different ways. Check out this painting Chevrons shawl. This begins with a longer I-cord tail in dark blue, and then you pick up stitches with the same color and you knit the rest of the shawl. It's a rectangular shape for painting chevrons, so you just keep repeating those chevrons and make this wrap as long as you want. Really easy. Over here we have a similar shape, the Mohairino Medley. This also begins with a really long I-cord tail, and then you pick up stitches using the technique that you just learned and play with stripes and mohair, yarn overs, a lot of the other techniques used in this shawl, like the I-cord bind off and some of these yarn over techniques you'll find on my YouTube channel as well. So beautiful stripes and color play in the Mohairino Medley. This is probably one of the more easy patterns to knit with a little bit of a shaping technique, but definitely not too difficult to knit Mohairino Medley. The Chevrollelogram shawl starts with a little baby I-cord. It's a cute little tail where you just cast on the I-cord, do the same pickup technique, and then you increase in chevrons with texture, and I really love that jagged, funky edge to Chevrollelogram. One more sample to show you is the Wavy Wiggles. This is a really easy pattern to knit as well because it's all in garter stitch with these fun little peekaboo yarn overs. This cast on is done with a contrast color. So you can see I use this fluffy alpaca yarn for the I-cord tail, and then when you pick up from that tail, you do it with the next color. So pick up the stitches with a second color, and that will really give you this color pop frame to the beginning of your shawl. Don't you just love those I-cord edges? They start really smooth, and when you continue the I-cord, they frame the edges perfectly to give a really sophisticated finish to your shawls. If you want to try some other I-cord techniques, I have a lot of other technique videos. You can see some of them linked down below, and subscribe to my channel to catch a lot more techniques and fun knitspiration. I'll see you in the next video.